All right, again, according to the social clock, after you get married, you're supposed to go on and have children, although obviously not everyone does, and that's perfectly acceptable. And so the decision to have children is influenced by a number of factors. There is a trend towards delaying parenthood, having smaller families, and also towards people choosing not to have children at all. And again, a lot of that comes down to roles that women play within the family. More women are dividing their time between family and work, and so it makes sense that they would delay having children or have less children so that that balance isn't quite as difficult. Some of the reasons reported to make the decision to have children are the personal rewards that come from that. So, feeling complete, having, a connection with another person that's kind of on a different level than any other relationship you have. Some of the social returns that come from having children. So, people tend to put pressure on people to have kids, and having that social connection of, you can share stories about having kids, etc. Some people also cite the idea of future continuity, that if I have a child, then whenever I die, I have someone who's going to pass on my legacy, and sort of continue my values and beliefs, etc. Some of the concerns that deter people from having kids, again, probably none of these are surprising. Loss of freedom. Some people view, having children as something that's going to tie you down, that's going to make it more difficult to do what you want to do. Role overload. So especially if you, have a career that you're really devoted to and committed to, and you like to have a social life and all these other things going on, then adding kids to the mix can make it really difficult to play all those different roles and do everything you want to do. Financial costs is one of the big things that's cited. So it's been said that it costs about $300,000 to raise a kid from birth to age 18. I would guess that's probably a pretty conservative estimate. I don't know how they even get this number, but and that's of course not taking into account things like college and all the expenses that come after 18. Also readiness to have kids. So a lot of people report maybe they want to have kids in the future, but they're just not ready now. Maybe they feel like they're not mature enough or responsible enough, or they're not financially ready. And then of course, women's careers, I've talked about multiple times, can also impact that decision. So like all the other transition periods, transition to parenthood can often be a very stressful and difficult time. A lot of times the parental roles will shift pretty dramatically whenever you have the first child. So even a couple who has very egalitarian views of marriage, who share responsibilities, a lot of times whenever they have that first kid, they resort back to more traditional roles, particularly within the first few months of the child's life. That can be particularly true if the mother is breastfeeding, for example. Then it kind of falls on the mom to be the one taking care of the child, and so those gender roles become more traditional during that time. Typically with the second and later births, then there's a less traditional approach. The father tends to help out more compared to the first child. Oftentimes there will be a mild decline in relationship satisfaction following the birth of particularly the first child. Sharing childcare is one thing that can help alleviate that and predicts happiness. It's been shown that if you have a pretty good, stable relationship before you have the kid, then that can continue after the child is born. But if you have a sort of tumultuous relationship or a difficult relationship, then oftentimes that can be made worse by having a child. Later parenthood makes this transition easier. So again, if you wait to have kids until early 30s or so, then it's often easier to transition into parenthood compared to if you have children earlier. That's partly due because the parent may have already attained some of their occupational goals. It's pretty difficult to be raising a kid while you're trying to, go through graduate school or trying to figure out what career you want to do and get established. Once you are established in a career, then it may be easier to transition to that. Also, if you wait, then you're going to have more life experience that you can use to help raise a child. You will likely also have a stronger relationship with your spouse or partner that will make co-parenting easier, more sort of fluent and efficient. The role of parents changes quite a bit as the children grow older. So with young children, it's very effective if the parents are working together, if they're on the same page, if they have, kind of the same views and ideas, they're sort of helping back each other up. Some of the challenges with young children There are often few societal supports, especially within the occupation. It can be really hard to find childcare. If you have both parents working, then it's necessary, obviously, to have someone looking after the kid. It can be really difficult to find daycare that is affordable, but that is also high quality. There are, a lot of cases where child care centers have waiting lists that are years and years long. I remember when I first tried to enroll my kid in daycare, and I would call around to all these daycare centers that were supposed to be the best ones, and they're like, well, we have a waiting list of 3 years. I'm like, okay, 3 years from now I'm not going to need childcare because my kid's going to be in preschool. What is even the point of that? But there's a lot of places that have just these outrageously long wait lists just to get into the daycare. And typically the ones that don't have the wait lists are going to be a little bit lower quality. So then you have to make a bunch of decisions about how much money do I want to spend versus what quality care do I want my child to have. So that can be extremely difficult if you have both parents working and you're trying to work that out. Some of the benefits of young children, you have expanded emotional capacity. So a lot of people with young children report that basically, the relationship they have with their kid is something that's completely different from any other kind of relationship. So it sort of opens you up to a different type of emotional love that you probably won't experience anywhere else. In a similar vein, it's said that you can have a more meaningful life whenever you have children, and I can agree with that. And it's also been shown that people who choose to have children typically have greater psychological well-being than those who do not have children. With adolescence, so once the child hits that adolescent stage, then that brings some pretty sharp, drastic changes to parenting roles, which we already talked about a little bit when we talked about adolescence. So you have increased conflict between the child and the parents, which can cause a lot of stress. And oftentimes there will be a dip in marital and life satisfaction whenever the first child hits that adolescent stage. It's also, I think I talk about this later, but that period where the first kid hits adolescence is one of the most common times for the parents to get divorced. So it can be very stressful during that time period.